Hey, so you guys know that I talk a lot about hearing the voice of God. And one of the things that has come up with my ministry team a lot lately is the idea of decreasing the static in your life. So the static is going to be the interference that hinders you from hearing the voice of God. And so let me start with a couple of scriptures first. So one of the scriptures that got highlighted to me about this was Psalm 46:10, and in one translation it reads, "Be still and know that I am God." And then in another one it says, he says, "Stop your striving and recognize that I am God," right? So this is about finding that place of quiet. And in Luke 5:16, it says, "But Jesus himself would often slip away to the wilderness and pray." So again, this is about finding that place of quiet. And it doesn't necessarily have to be physically a quiet place. This is about finding internally a quiet place. Now, for me, because I spend a lot of time alone and in silence because I work from home, and so it's nice and quiet here aside from the dog who, whines and cries periodically, but I am used to physical quiet. So for me to find that internal quiet, frequently I find it best if I find a place of physical quiet as well. But there are other people who are used to that kind of noise around them and are able to find an internal quiet place, even if the environment doesn't necessarily seem conducive to this. So the reason that I mention this is because decreasing static is a completely individual thing. And so what I'm talking about here is really more of becoming conscious of what creates static for you, and then being intentional to not have those things happen. So for me, a lot of noise around me increases static for me. And when I say static, I mean it inhibits my ability to hear God clearly, right? It's like, for those of you who are old enough to remember with radios, when you would tune into a radio station, you'd start tuning in and you could sort of hear it, but there was kind of interference, and you would keep twisting the dial until you dialed right in and you could hear it perfectly. And so this is essentially what we're doing, is learning how to do that. Now, I have found for me, if I watch a lot of television or movies or stuff like that, it creates a lot of noise internally. It creates a lot of static, even when I'm not watching it, because my brain will be remembering the things that I've seen. Now, I am not saying that TV or movies are inherently bad. It's not the argument I'm trying to have here. I'm simply saying, for me personally, I have learned that I need to minimize my exposure to that because it increases static in my relationship with God. I have found that reading fiction does not create that same level of static. So for me, I spend a lot of time reading if I'm going to do something recreational. But again, it could be completely different for you. But what I'm encouraging you today is to be mindful of what creates static. There are relationships that could create static. There are environmental things that could create static. For some people, they have more static towards the end of the day because they tend to like to sort of recap their day in their mind. And so if they sit and have time with God at the end of the day, they have difficulty focusing because they're going over their day, right? And so for someone like that, well, you make sure you have your God time at the beginning of the day when you don't have a bunch of stuff going through your head. So some of this is just really determining what the factors are for static and managing to decrease them as much as possible. And so it really is just being intentional with your time, with your environment, with your exposure to things that may or may not create static. And so just learn to be mindful of that. And so that's it. Hopefully that helps somebody, but just that concept of decreasing the static has been so helpful for me because it's really made me think about the choices that I'm making. And do I really want to do this right now? Because I know that later this is going to cause an issue. Even like what I watch on television. Television in general creates static, but certain things create more static than other things. Or even books that I may read. Like if I read a book that's set in wartime, as an intercessor, I feel things deeply. And so what happens is if I'm reading something that really wrenches my heart, like it takes me a few days to recover. That creates static. And so if I do that, I want to be really intentional about when I do that, how often I do that, or how not often as the case may be. And so all of these factors are just things to keep in mind so that you can create the most ripe environment for your relationship with God that you can. So anyway, hopefully that's helpful to someone, and God bless you as you seek Him. Have a great day.